Since returning to office, Donald Trump's hardline immigration crackdown has sent shockwaves through immigrant communities, spreading fear well beyond those living in the country illegally. Sweeping enforcement actions, described by critics as indiscriminate and brutal, have alarmed civil rights groups and even unsettled some Republicans. CGTN's Alistair Baverstock has this report.
On January 21st, 2025, the day after Donald Trump's return to the White House, across the country, the streets of Chula Vista, California, were empty.
It's a ghost town. There's people there that don't want to come out. They don't want to take the chance of getting caught. Even some that are naturalized, they're afraid.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The day of Trump's inauguration, he signed a series of immigration and border security-related executive orders and intensified immigration raids across America, frightening both the undocumented and those who entered through legal pathways, like Carla Ponce from Venezuela.
Miedo. I'm scared. Everyone's scared. At work, people are cancelling their shifts because they don't want to leave their homes.
In early March, further controversy was stoked when the Trump administration conducted deportations of men to El Salvador's maximum security mega prison, known as the Terrorism Confinement Center, or SECOT. The move came after the US struck a deal to pay about $6 million for 1 year of services to President Nayib Bukele's government to imprison hundreds of alleged Tren de Aragua gang members from Venezuela deported from the US.
President Bukele and his team plan to continue to incarcerate these individuals, and we will continue to partner with them to continue those fights throughout the rest of President Trump's term.
Humanitarian groups expressed concerns over the placing of civil immigration detainees in a facility designed for violent offenders, while a US judge's court order to halt and return the deportation flights as they were happening was disobeyed by the Trump administration. According to the US Department of Justice, it was DHS Chief Noem who defied that court order, for which she could face contempt charges after a federal judge launched an investigation into the matter. With the recent suspension of all US asylum claims and immigration raids sparking riots in Los Angeles and other American cities, many migrant hopefuls on their way to the US chose to retrace their steps.
The US is no longer an option, and I want to go back to my own country, even though we have nothing there. We sold everything we owned to migrate.
Administration.
For immigration attorney Felix Sanchez, the Trump administration's policy changes have attacked the entire legal system surrounding immigration.
Now it's a little bit more sinister. Now we're seeing the administration firing a lot of judges that they deem to be friendly to immigrants and replacing those with people that are perceived to be more hardline. So the impact will progressively get worse during the next 4 years.
As for the future, Trump remains firm on his administration's position.
How long does your administration plan to pause asylum into the U.S.?
I think a long time. No time limit. But it could be a long time.
You said that.
We don't want those people. Do you understand that?
As a landmark year for the phenomenon of US migration draws to a close, the Trump administration's policies have impacted millions, both inside and outside the country. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
We now take a look at how immigration has shaped the United States over the last year and what the outlook might be for 2026. To discuss this and much more, let's bring in our guest. Joining us from North Carolina, Andrew Arthur is a resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. Here with me in the studios, Douglas Sloan is principal at the National Capital Strategy Group. From Maryland, Joseph Williams is a former senior editor at U.S. News and World Report. And here in Washington, D.C., Abel Núñez is the executive director of CARECEN, Central American Resource Center. I want to welcome all of you to the show. And Abel, why don't I start with you? I think Al Baverstock did a nice job of setting this up. I mean, give us your sense of this second go-round with Donald Trump as president and his immigration policies. How have they changed from his first go-round, would you say?
Well, I think that I think the administration understands how government works and is really doing a much better job of dismantling the system, right? So we're seeing things in asylum, we're seeing things in how people come in to this country. They're eliminating the diversity lottery visa, and a bunch of other systems in place that in the past gave the ability of people to adjust status. But it's very clear that this administration is focusing on the specific people that they don't want. I mean, the president has talked about countries that he doesn't desire. He wants more people from northern Nordic countries, not from the south of the hemisphere. And I think it's very clear. I think that this is an administration that is using fear tactics to scare people into leaving, and they're violating the rights of citizens in the process.
Andrew, fear tactics, it was interesting. We did hear one of the women in Alistair's story saying, I'm scared. Everyone is scared. The U.S. president said he was going to deport about 1 million people when he got back into office. It looks like it's going to be more like 622,000. What's your take on this first year and his immigration approach?
Well, first, I do have to say, I don't remember the president saying that he wanted people from Nordic countries. What he wants are people who can come to the United States and contribute here. We don't want people who are going to draw down our social safety net. But in any event, when we talk about the fear, much of that fear is actually coming from the president's political opponents. We see J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, none of whom contributed to President Trump's campaign, who are out there talking about this, massive sweep of people, being rounded up off the streets and, tossed into unmarked vehicles, disappeared and taken out of the country. And of course, that's not how our legal system works. Everybody in this country is entitled to due process. Many of those people have already received due process or under final orders for removal. With respect to the rest, they will have their day in court. They will have the opportunity to appear before a judge. So, there's a whole lot of rhetoric from both the right and the left that is contributing to this idea that something is different. It's not different. In 1984, the Supreme Court noted the fact that about 1 million people are arrested and deported every year. So nothing's really changed except for the rhetoric.
Douglas, we got you here in studio. Trump, of course, gave an address recently, talked about a lot of things, including immigration policies. Let's listen to a little of what he had to say, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Our border was open, and because of this, our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people, many who came from prisons and jails, mental institutions, and insane asylums. They were drug dealers, gang members, and even 11,888 murderers, more than 50% of whom killed more than one person. This is what the Biden administration allowed to happen to our country.
Now, the fact checkers afterwards went through that with a fine-tooth comb. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. They say some of the numbers inflated, inaccurate, misleading. But what was the point of this rhetoric, do you think, from the president?
Yeah, well, he's trying to rationalize a lot of this hyper-aggressive immigration enforcement that's going on with ICE and Department of Homeland Security. So he's trying to paint all immigrants, particularly those from South America, Asia, and Africa, as being criminals, as being undesirables, as people that shouldn't be here. And we know that's not the case. We know that immigrants are actually most likely to open businesses and create jobs, not just for immigrants, but also for American citizens. And we also know that immigrants are less likely than American citizens to commit crimes. So this is just him trying to rationalize some of these hyper-aggressive enforcement tactics that are really ripping apart communities and tearing America apart at its very core. We're seeing some of these tactics actually harm urban businesses, immigrant businesses, where Americans are employed. So it's having a negative and adverse effect on our economy as well.
Joseph, negative impact. It is stoking fear in a lot of these communities, not just of people who are here illegally, but people who are here legally who are fearful that, as we heard from that woman saying, we're all scared. It's incited national outrage as well, these ICE raids in a number of cities. We've seen it in Los Angeles, Minneapolis, New York City, Denver, the list goes on and on, New Orleans. It's also led to these No Kings protests nationwide. What do you think the American sentiment is about this, this immigration crackdown?
The American people clearly don't like it. Trump's immigration poll numbers have cratered. I mean, this was a strength of his coming into office, and now it's one of his many liabilities. I think the number of people who approve is hovering right around 39%, and a lot of that is propped up by the extreme right wing. You ask centrists and you ask moderates what they think of this process. It's right around 20%, maybe 15% in some cases, and it's all inflated. Douglas was talking about inflated numbers. It's ridiculous what the president is able to get away with, rhetorically speaking, and the fact that Republicans don't really want to call him on this is really kind of staggering to me, and one of the reasons why we're in the situation that we're in. And never mind the fact that the president insisted they were getting the worst of the worst. That's clearly not happening. A clear majority of people who are caught up in these sweeps have no criminal record at all. And some 30% of them are actually American citizens or people who are here legally who did, in fact, have their day of court and still get swept up in these rates anyway, mainly because they speak Spanish or English with a heavy accent and have brown skin. So I think this process writ large is going to be a long-term fiasco for our country in more ways than one, not to mention the fact that we're losing a good tax-paying base, we're losing a part of our workforce, we're losing what makes us good as a country and great as a nation, most notably the Statue of Liberty, which says, bring us your tired, you're poor, you're wretched. We're saying, no, thank you. We want to be a white ethno state. And I don't think you need to look any further. Maybe the president might have not specifically said Nordic countries, but he certainly is opening his arms for South Africans, particularly Afrikaners, who he says are being persecuted, which is an outright lie. I mean, it's staggering how the upside down has become right side up under this president in terms of immigration. It's really quite amazing.
Andrew, we do know that volume is kind of driving the administration. There's been a lot of reporting that Stephen Miller's been trying to get the ICE agents to bring in more people and get the deportation numbers up. Let's listen to Darius Reeves. He's a former ICE Field Office Director for Enforcement and Removal Operations. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
We're picking up just any and everybody. We don't have the infrastructure to hold any and everybody. I thought we were going to be the most egregious of offenders. Now we're hitting a Home Depot and hoping that we find someone who's a day laborer who wasn't arrested for anything or any major crime. He just happens to enter the United States illegally, which is a misdemeanor at most. Okay, why are we holding on to this person?
So, Andrew, you know, we can debate the Nordic piece of all of this, but we do remember during the campaign that Trump did say he was going to get the worst of the worst. It doesn't seem like these people fit that category. What happened?
So it was actually Tom Homan who talked about the worst strategy. And again, I go back to some points that I made before. When Donald Trump took office, there were 1.44 million people under final orders of removal who continue to live here, notwithstanding the fact that they did have their day in court. In FY 2025, immigration judges have ordered removed nearly 500,000 more people. So when you talk about the population of people who don't have crimes, it's actually lower than most of the questionable statistics that I've heard tonight. And I do look at numbers every day. Last time I ran the numbers, about 60% of the people who were in ICE detention either had a criminal conviction or a criminal arrest. So that's actually more than half, 60%. But I think that what we see is we see operations that take place in large areas because ICE doesn't have the ability to go and arrest criminals in jails in sanctuary states like Illinois, like New York, like places like that. So they have to go out and find the people where they are. In the course of doing that, they're going to find other people who are here illegally. But, you know, I've known Tom Homan for years, and I understand immigration enforcement seemingly better than anybody else on this call. So one of the things that I know is you're not going to get a high yield if you simply go into a large place and you go looking for anybody that you can find. Where in the world the 30% statistic about U.S. citizens being arrested came from, I don't know. But having been an immigration judge myself, I can tell you that you just don't find citizens in immigration courts. So I think that what we're looking at is we're looking at operations that's being filtered through a very Trump hostile media lens. It's coming out on the other side, and we're, accepting as fact things that just aren't true. I don't even know that Stephen Miller made the comment, but I do see it a lot. Mr. Miller has never come out and admitted that he made that comment, which is a little odd if he did, because Stephen Miller is one of those guys who pretty freely speaks his mind about whatever he thinks about. So, I think that we need to take a step back. We need to look at what's actually happening. We need to look at the numbers. And we need to assume that the Trump administration is complying with the law. If it's not, there are 700 district court judges in this country who are more than willing to step in and tell him he's not. And they've been very free about doing that thus far, and I anticipate they're going to continue to do so.
Andrew, I did find the story. Donald Trump bemoaned a lack of immigrants to the U.S. from nice countries like Denmark or Switzerland, which I think are probably Nordic nations. Abel, I want to give you a chance to talk about what Andrew just said. 60% of these people are bad apples. They need to go. And it's a Trump hostile media environment that's kind of driving this other narrative.
Well, I think that one of the things that we can agree is that the system was already broken. So it wasn't that Trump came in and broke it. It has been the lack of action by Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, that have not been able to modernize an immigration system that works for this nation or the immigrants themselves. Having said that, it's very interesting how people on Trump's side of the aisle forget a lot of these things. I mean, you have Stephen Miller that said Americans were for Americans. You don't have to believe what I have to say, but look at the images that are passing by. You have ICE enforcement, CBP enforcement covering their faces. They are the ones firing tear gas, pepper balls into crowds, very tactics that are very aggressive, and it's done on purpose. It's not by mistake. And I get it. You're looking for confrontations to make chaos so that they're justified in their actions. And I think that that's the dangerous part here. When a law enforcement agency can act with impunity or close to impunity, they will make a lot of mistakes. And, they will be like, let the courts fix it. But I think that there has to be a way in which police are also held accountable for their behavior. And at this point, you're having an administration that is very anti-immigrant. You have a candidate that from his first term called Mexicans rapists and criminals. And so that's the frame, and leadership comes from the top. And unless you have an administration that's willing to hold the president accountable, this can only get worse.
Douglas, I was listening to a radio report recently. They were talking to a couple of people in the Boston area who'd assembled. They were going to do the citizenship test, take the oath of citizenship. It was all canceled. We're hearing a lot of that now. Immigration interviews, exams canceled, no reason given. The Department of Homeland Security now strengthening the citizenship test before these people can take it. Additional questions, 128 versus 100. Talk to me about some of these steps that they're taking and what's your take on that?
Well, it's just not there. They're going all across the board here. They're revoking the temporary protected status of many countries, Haiti, Ethiopia, Burma. I think Venezuela obviously is on the list because, Trump has a burr for Venezuela right now. And many other countries, of course, again, in South America, Africa, and Asia are having their protected status revoked. And also there's been a change in the rules to how ICE agents can deny green cards to incoming immigrants if they feel that the immigrants are going to be on any type of public assistance. And this includes health assistance like Medicare. They can deny them a green card. So we're seeing changes across the board in terms of how they are trying to deter immigrants from even coming into this country and being able to establish themselves as citizens or people with green cards and so on and so forth. So it's really just balls to the wall push by Trump against immigration from pretty much any country that's outside of Europe.
And Joseph, we're seeing these religious groups going to court, suing the administration over changes to Biden-era policy that barred immigration officers from targeting protected areas like schools and churches and hospitals where people might be going for religious services or dropping their kids off at school or perhaps going for a medical exam or that sort of thing. Why target these areas, do you think?
Again, fear is the point. You target those areas because they were given safe haven, and you target those areas to let people know that there is no quarter here. There's nowhere you can run or hide. And again, fear is the point, and that's what's driving this whole thing. And I kind of wonder what the point is here. I mean, if we're targeting churches where we know that there are people who are following the law, who are being following a moral compass at the very least, I don't understand why this is such an imperative. And I do think that Stephen Miller is one of the driving forces behind this, because there have been multiple reports suggesting that he is pushing agents to kind of bend the law and look at people without probable cause other than the color of their skin and their accent coming out of their mouth. So I don't think that there's anything other, I don't think there's a solid argument to be made here that this is going only after the worst of the worst, not to mention the fact, to the judge's earlier point, a lot of these people who have quote unquote criminal convictions are for things like, I don't know, driving without a license, or, relatively minor harmless crimes, mainly because all of the super predator criminals have already been swept up already. And so you've got to make the number. And if you got to make the number, that's why you end up in Home Depot parking lots. That's why you end up in churches. That's why you end up putting people in CCOT who deserve nothing close to being, that level of punishment. I mean, even the fact that we're making deals with corrupt governments on the backs of an immigration issue is again another one of these staggering facts that I never would have thought that this country would have stood for.
Andrew, it seemed like the president was kind of loosening up in some areas, though. Concerns coming from the agriculture sector that they were being impacted. Do you see any kind of softening anywhere, or do you think this is going to be continuing into 2026?
Sure. I mean, there's actually been reports that have come out that DHS is considering a shift in policy with respect to the individuals that it is targeting, that it will start going to the prisons that it can go to in those states that don't want to coddle their prisoners or vouchsafe them, to go and find individuals there. That it's going to expand certain other operations, more targeted operations, to go after those individuals. But it is curious that in previous years, my experience in this area goes back more than 30 years. This really isn't that unusual in immigration posture. When we talk about, the public charge rule, this new change, that law's been in effect since 1996. The problem is it hasn't been enforced. So when we talk about an immigration system that's broken, I worked on Capitol Hill. I wrote legislation. I wrote part of the Immigration and Nationality Act. The system is only broken to the degree that it hasn't been enforced. And now, after more than 20 years of non-enforcement, we're actually seeing enforcement of the laws it's written. Generally, when a law is enforced, if Congress decides it doesn't like the law, it will change the law, and Congress has plenary authority over this. But with respect to the laws it's written today, as ICE is enforcing it, there is an indication that there is going to be a switch over. But I will also note that in the latest Harvard-Harris poll that came out in the beginning of December, the second most popular policy of the Trump administration out of like 20, other than lowering drug prices, was deporting criminal illegal aliens in the United States. So most of what the administration is doing what people want. But I think, again, this has been filtered through a very hostile media system, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing.
Abel, ICE and Border Patrol likely to get more money, $170 billion targeted in additional funds through September of 2029. What's going to be the impact there? Where do you see this going in 2026?
Yeah, no, it's just going to increase. Now they have the ability to hire more agents, have more detention beds. That would just create a lot of pain. And, I would question the type of training that these new officers are going to get. We know that they are reducing the amount of time that officers have to train. You also are getting more leadership from the Border Patrol instead of ICE. Right, because we have to think about that ICE enforcement is not by one law enforcement agency. There are multiple law enforcement agencies that are operating. They all have different mandates, and they all have different tactics in the way they apply immigration law. And I would want to say that we talk about sanctuary laws, and I would like to say that sanctuary laws is about state rights. It's about the ability of a municipality to decide that they're not going to do work that is not under their charter. Federal immigration law is federal law, and so federal enforcement needs to have them. It is not that they're barred or they don't collaborate. Police forces collaborate all the time, but this red herring that is used about sanctuary cities, you got to ask the president, why is he only targeting a lot of his efforts in blue states? He said it. He said that he's going after the blue states, because we have to remember immigrants are all over the country. Immigrants are in red states. There are in multiple cities all over this country. And to say that sanctuary somehow prevents ICE or any federal agency for doing the work is ridiculous. This is about state rights. That's what sanctuary is. It's about being able to do what a state wants to do and keep those worlds separate, the federal government and the state government.
And so, Douglas, what's going to be the impact? We've got midterm elections coming up. They're just around the corner. How is this going to factor into the races, do you believe?
I think that Trump and the Republicans, Trump in particular, are giving the midterm elections and control of Congress over to the Democrats on a gold platter. This is going to be a perfect blue tsunami, perfect storm. We're already seeing the beginnings of it. We're already seeing in red districts that were thoroughly dominated by Trump in the general election last year are now swinging towards Democrats. We saw it in Virginia with Abigail Spanberger. We're seeing it in Miami. They have a Democratic mayor for the first time in 30 years. Trump's approval ratings are in the toilet in pretty much every single demographic and every single subject matter, and he's dragging the Republicans down with them.
And Joseph, let me ask you one final question in that regard. We got about 20 seconds. Hispanic voters really helped him gain the White House this second time around, and we see those numbers cratering as well, don't we?
Absolutely, and it's going to be tough for them to vote for him from a detention center. A lot of people are having buyer's remorse. A lot of Latino voters are having buyer's remorse. I don't expect that to reverse anytime soon.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank all of you for joining us. It's been a great discussion, and that's going to do it for us. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching another edition of The Heat.